Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Silicon Dragon Online, New York 2020. Well, we were supposed to be in Manhattan today, having this event live, like we normally do, and we usually have so much fun with that. And we always have a great turnout and great drinks and great food, but we're virtual today. But anyhow, stay with us because we will have a toast at the end and we will have networking at the end online. So I hope that you'll enjoy our program today. We have a really excellent program planned for you. It's about 2 hours, so hang in there. So a little bit about Silicon Dragon. Besides us going online in early April, we also do all these other activities, such as the weekly newsletter, our mobile app, our videos, and now our Ask a VC Anything series, which I know many of you have attended and participated in. So I appreciate that. That's usually on a Thursday. And this forum today takes the place of our usual Ask a VC Anything series, which has been great fun. I've gotten to know many VCs a lot better now through our hour-long program with them, and it gives everyone a chance to ask them anything. So it's been great. So stars of our show today. See all their faces here. Melissa, Guzy, Sean O'Sullivan, Robin Lee, Kamran Ansari, Mason Du, Ricky Chu. Our next speaker, who you're going to be hearing from very soon as I get finished rambling on. This is Christian Busch, who has a new book out this week. And I know he is very, very busy because I remember what it was like on my book launches. It was just nonstop. So I'm glad that Christian has made time for us today. Today we're talking about, well, partly the topic of his book, which is serendipity, but you know, the lucky mindset, right? So I actually consider myself fairly lucky. Seems like things go my way. I'm kind of positive about things, so maybe that's part of it. But we're going to hear from Christian how to create this serendipity in your own lives. We have a wonderful program today, also focused on venture capital and what's happening in funding and startups in this post-COVID-19 era. Innovation moving at warp speed. We are in a very disruptive time, and as we know, crisis equals opportunity. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our full program, which you'll see here, and I'll keep coming back to this agenda so you can keep track of what we're doing. And without further ado, our book talk. I love to put an author on stage, and on stage here virtually, Christian, The Serendipity Mindset, The Art and Science of Creating Good Luck. And Christian is the director of the Global Economy Program, and he is on the faculty at NYU. And so Christian, I am going to stop sharing my screen now, and you start to share your screen, and we look forward to your presentation. So Christian's going to give a presentation, and then afterwards you can chime in with chat on the the Q&A bar below, the Q&A bar or the chat bar. So okay, let's do our switch, Christian.
Well, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Rebecca, and hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's wonderful to be here with you today. And this is a topic that I've been fascinated by for the last 10, 15 years as community builder, company builder, and now in academia, because it's something where the most successful, joyful, purpose-driven people that I've worked with, that I've studied, they all seem to have something in common. And what that was they intuitively cultivated serendipity. They intuitively turned unexpected moments into opportunity. They intuitively somehow had a bit more luck than others, but they worked really hard for it. And so I've been really excited about this question of, is it really hard work versus luck? Or is there a way that we can cultivate serendipity and that we can set ourselves up for it? And what is almost a science-based framework for doing that is applicable to different businesses to different individuals and so on. And that's obviously something that's particularly relevant at the moment where, you know, we see breweries turning into hand sanitizer companies. We see emergency ride services turning into, or emergency ride services emerging out of senior citizen car sharing programs and so on. People connecting the dots and really saying, okay, what is something that we can do in a situation that is unexpected? So that particularly plays a role in these kind of collectively unexpected moments, but throughout history in every field, the most interesting innovations and the most interesting happenings that shape our life obviously come unexpectedly, right? I mean, it might be your love partner, it might be your co-founder that you randomly met at a conference and somehow you came together, your investors, right? All these different types of themes. And in history, of course, we also, I mean, one of the most known ones is this one. I won't ask you what it is. It's always a bit of a trick question, but so a couple of decades ago, a couple of researchers, you know, they were injecting people with something. They tried to cure angina, and they saw some kind of movement in male participants' trousers, and they were like, okay, well, this is embarrassing. What would most people would do? They would either try to ignore it, or they would say, well, let's work on the side effect and make sure that people don't get an erection when that happens, right? They did the opposite. They said, well, we know that there's a lot of people in the world that have that kind of problem, so why don't we try to develop a medication out of this that actually cures that kind of problem? And so that's how Viagra evolved, right? It was essentially people connecting the dots. The same with this here. This is a company in China that is a white goods company, and they got calls from farmers. And the farmers, they said, well, look, we're trying to wash our potatoes in your washing machine and it always breaks down. Why is it always breaking down? And what would we usually do? We would try to educate the customer, right? We would say, well, don't wash your potatoes in the washing machine. They did exactly the opposite. They said, you know what? There's a lot of farmers in China, right? So why don't we put in a dirt filter and make it a potato washing machine? And that's what they did. And here is the potato washing machine that emerged out of it. Another example, a couple of years ago, you might remember in Europe, there was this big volcano breaking out in Iceland with this unpronounceable name that I won't even, it's E and then 14 letters. And that volcano broke out. And I got a call in the morning on a Saturday by someone in San Francisco. We didn't even know each other yet, but he was like, hey, Christian, look, all these attendees of the Skoll World Forum, they're all stuck in London. I'm stuck with them here. So you know what? I want to organize a conference. Within 30 hours, he organized TEDx Volcano with amazing speakers, 10,000 people recorded live stream, and you know, without any kind of budget or anything else, because what he did was he had the same kind of situation, right? A volcano breaking out, but he knew that TED would love a story around turning uncertainty into opportunity. So he called them up. He got a couple of other people involved and made the best out of this. That's also happening, of course, in companies. Some of you might have come across these kind of things like post-mortems or project funerals, where essentially the idea is that usually when we make a mistake or something doesn't work out, we hide it, right? We try to move on. The problem, of course, is we never learn from it. Some companies do the opposite. They say, if something doesn't work out, we want that person to present in front of other people, other project managers or people from other divisions, why they think it didn't work. So it's not about celebrating failure, but it's celebrating the learning from the failure. And so essentially in one example, they would have this glass, like a window glass, and the idea was the light wouldn't reflect, and they underestimated nobody really pays a lot of money for just because there's no light reflection. So they laid it to rest and they said, okay, we learned that next time we got to understand the market a bit better. Then there's someone in the audience who says, well, have you considered what this would mean for solar? If you would put that same technology into a solar kind of device, it would amazingly absorb all the energy, right? And that is how part of their solar division emerged. It was completely coincidental that that person was in the audience, but you know what? These kind of things happen more often coincidentally because they develop rituals and practices around it that made these things much more likely to happen. And so that's what I'm most curious about, is how do we set ourselves up, our minds, and also our companies that make it more likely that these kind of incidences happen and that we do something with it. And that's what I found most fascinating about serendipity. So this kind of unexpected good luck that results from these kind of unexpected moments and that we turn into positive outcomes, that is not just something like blind luck that happens to us, right? It's not like, I don't know, if you, let's say you inherit something or you're born into a loving family, that's blind luck. We didn't work for it, right? That happens. But smart luck, serendipity, is really about saying it's a process. It's something we can influence. It's that kind of, all the examples we just talked about had some kind of trigger, some kind of situation that happened, a volcano breaking out, some movement in male participants' trousers, farmers calling up and saying, I want to wash my potatoes in your washing machine. All these things are unexpected, right? But then we need someone who connects the dots. We need someone who does something with this information and connects it to a problem or something that they've been aware of. And we need the tenacity to actually do something with it. If higher others would have stopped by just, or the Chinese company, if they would have stopped and said, okay, we've seen this, we know there's a problem, but we don't do anything with it, nothing would have happened, right? So we need the tenacity with it. Again, the same with, you know, any kind of other type of serendipity. Of course, most of the time we miss serendipity. We might not see the trigger, we might not connect the dots, or we might not essentially have the tenacity to go through with it. And the way we can know this, of course, is there's a lot of kind of experiments around counterfactual. So for example, how you could show different life histories that could have unfolded if you had done X, Y, Z. You know, it's even the easy thing of like, you're missing the tube or the subway, and you think about, okay, if I would have gotten this subway, I would have met this person, X, Y, Z would have unfolded differently if this would have happened not. There's, for example, things in history where discoveries, like people discover the same thing, but some follow up on it and others don't. When they now look back, it was serendipitous that it happened, but actually they had the tenacity to go through with it. So we can see these different life histories and different types of histories evolving. There's also nice experiments around luck. So one experiment, for example, took someone who identifies as very lucky and someone who identifies as very unlucky. And they told them, okay, walk down the street, go into the coffee shop, grab a coffee and sit next to the counter on the table. What they didn't tell them is that there was a £5 note in front of the shop, that there were a lot of hidden cameras in the shop and in the street, and that this person on the counter was this super successful businessman who can make a lot of dreams happen. Now, the lucky person walks down the street, sees the £5 note, picks it up, goes into the shop, orders a coffee, has a conversation with the barista probably, sits down next to the businessman, has a nice conversation. We don't know if an opportunity comes out of it, but obviously it wouldn't be unexpected, right? The unlucky person walks down the street, steps over the £5 note, goes inside the shop, orders the coffee, sits next to the businessman and ignores the businessman, that's it. Now, at the end of the day, they ask the two people, so how was your day? And the lucky person says, well, it was amazing. I found money in the street. I made 2 new friends. And again, we don't know if an opportunity came out of it, but might as well, right? They asked the unlucky person, how was your day? Well, nothing really happened. And that is, you know, in terms of, you might see people who are in exactly the same setting, exactly the same situation. The one seems to have a bit more luck than others. And we'll talk about in a second what differentiates them. But so it's really about saying, hey, there's a lot of things that hold us back from having that. And there's a couple of biases that we all have and that other people might have less. So for example, we constantly underestimate how probable what we think is improbable is. So if you add up all the things that are improbable, right? It's very improbable that Sean now jumps in and says, this all doesn't make sense, or that Rebecca kind of, you know, jumps up and throws down her computer and everything breaks down. All these things are extremely improbable, right? But if we add up all these improbable things, actually it is not that improbable that something unexpected happens, right? And so the point is that, like, I always have this with my slightly erratic hand movements. There's always a wine that at some point falls down, or there's always, you know, there's always something that was unexpected, but it does happen, right? And the point is that once we realize that the unexpected actually is quite probable, we open our eyes to it. And then we can start, for example, having weekly meetings where the first question could be something like, what surprised you last week? Did you see something in the sales data that you didn't expect? And can we maybe course correct very quickly? Because actually then it wasn't a mistake, but we're just learning quickly and iterating quickly. And so once we set ourselves up away from that, we think we can plan it all out, to that humility of saying, we can have a sense of direction, but we also then have to iterate along the way, that is already half the way. Of course, we also a lot of times do something, and I want to show you this, I love this, a colleague of mine made this graphic, this idea that, you know, we always have a certain plan, right? Or a certain story, or like, even when we write our CV, right? We kind of map it all out, but then life happens, and life happens usually like as a squibble, right? It's like, it goes like, back and forth and unexpected moments and so on, but we still tell it as if it was like a step-by-step thing. And so we would narrate our CV as like, yeah, I went there and then I wanted to explore this and then I wanted to do this. Yeah, but you know what? You probably just ran into someone at a conference who told you about this and then you did this, right? And so essentially the point here is that a lot of CEOs, for example, in our studies, what we see is that they feel that they have to portray more control to their board than they actually have, right? They have to tell them, I planned this and then exactly this happened, because they know if they would say, I planned something slightly different, but then like this happened, it might be seen as like a loss of control. But actually one of the hopes I have with this book actually is that giving an active language to this and saying, actually the best thing you can do is to have a sense of direction, to have a vision, but then also to say that actually it will be very likely that something unexpected happens, and that is actually a strength to let go of the illusion of control, that we can know it all, right? And to then pretend that we had it all known all the time. A, because it makes us share knowledge more effectively because we're actually truthful, but B, also because actually that is how we price serendipity into everything we're doing to the degree that it actually happens. Now, what are the ways that we can cultivate serendipity? Rebecca and I had a tough negotiation about how much time I have for this presentation, so I'll keep this short, but I'm just mapping a couple of examples here and highlight two of those. One is setting hooks. I love this example of like an entrepreneur in London, Ollie Barrett. What he does is whenever someone asks him this dreaded, what do you do question, what he does is he says, well, I'm in education, but I've recently started exploring philosophy, but what I'm really excited about is connecting people. And so what he's doing here is he's giving us 3 potential dots that we can connect, where I could be like, oh my God, such a coincidence. I was just setting up a platform around connecting people. Let's talk. Or such a coincidence. My brother just went into philosophy. I want to connect you with it. The point here is that rather than putting just one dot out there, they open up an opportunity space of potential other dots. And we can apply that to so many different things and so many different practices. Then, of course, there's a lot around looking at mistakes or crisis differently, finding meaning in crisis. There's a lot around redefining situations, especially a lot of my work is in low-income contexts. And once we look at a context not only as resource constrained, but actually look at an old garage as a training center. We look at a former drug dealer as a potential teacher. And then essentially people feel they can start to create their own luck. And once that happens, you have creativity unfolding all the time and serendipity. We can also send serendipity bombs, which is really this practice of saying, you know, that a lot of times we can't know what someone is working on. We can't know what someone is doing next. But what we can do is from time to time sending people a bit of an update about something that maybe we're curious about, or, you know, placing some kind of things in the universe where people could connect to and do something with. And then, of course, there's a lot around space design and technology and developing that North Star. But with this, I think most of these things we can discuss in the Q&A session that's coming now. I want to close, you know, being a German, I want to close on a philosophical note. And that's really, especially at the moment, I feel a big one. It's kind of a lot rooted in Viktor Frankl's thinking around search for meaning. And he always had this beautiful idea that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And that space, that is our power to choose. And in this response, there's our growth and our freedom. And that's what I find so fascinating, that in a way, the way we react to the unexpected, Hubert Joly said that nicely in some of our work, the way you react to the unexpected defines who you are, because it shows in situations like at the moment, if you're a real leader or if you're not a real leader, it's what people remember, right? In situations of crisis, they remember how you acted. People in 10 years will still ask, what did you do during COVID? How did you act during COVID? So I think it's these kind of moments that really shape who we are and how we are seen by others. And so with this, thank you so much for watching. My editor tells me to mention that the book is here, that it's available. I tend to forget it, but now I'm clicking it through. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much, Rebecca, for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Very interesting. So Christian, in your own life, I mean, was it luck, directedness, serendipity that you wrote this book, that you ended up at NYU? I mean, how did this happen?
I mean, a constant, you know, I mean, it's the Steve Jobs thing, right? That like, you can only connect the dots at hindsight in the sense of like making true sense out of it. And I think in my case, certainly, you know, when I try to connect the dots at hindsight, I feel there's been that sense of direction around an intense search for meaning. I mean, I had an experience early on in life that made me realize how quickly life can be over, like a kind of near-death experience type setting in a car. And then essentially, I think I've developed this kind of deep longing for trying to figure out what are meaningful platforms, being that communities, companies, and other things that I can be part of, that I can help shape. But that in a way manifested in so many different ways, right? Communities, companies, academia, ideas, whatever it is. But certainly most of this was serendipitous, and even the book itself was serendipitous, driven actually by a semi-crisis for me, where I was pitching another book. So I was on holidays with friends of mine, and they are kind of like close to the publishing industry. And I was telling them about a book I wanted to write because I had worked a lot on profit and purpose. And I was like, hey, great, like I'll just put my whole research together and put it into a book. And their faces essentially were just like, well, that's interesting, but do you have other ideas as well? And so essentially I was like, okay, well, this idea doesn't seem to fly. And so what came to mind directly was serendipity, that this is something that I've seen work as a philosophy of life and as a daily practice, but also that's coming more and more of research. And so that whole night I was just sitting down and putting all the things together that I had since then. And so since the last 3 years now, it's been kind of just trying to aggregate all that papers and all the kind of different information and interviews and everything else and putting it in.
That's
But
great.
yeah, it was serendipitous.
Wow. And you have a great publisher here as well. I'm sure they've been very supportive and launching your book just 2 days ago, right? It's brand new.
Well, and they also made me rethink a lot of things, you know, in terms of, I remember the first time I handed in the manuscript, and they were like, look, Christian, we really like this. We like the business stories. We like the XYZ stories, but we need more love stories. And I was like, well, I'm not sure if I, as a single 35-year-old guy, am like the right person to talk about love. And they were like, no, but like, see if you can find some love stories. And so right after that, I was meeting my ex-partner of mine, who's a very close friend of mine now. And I asked her, so do you know of any love stories? Like, you know, I need something. And she was like, well, our story. And I was like, what do you mean our story? Like, we're not together anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're friends, but we're not together. And she was like, well, but you know what? Like, we met serendipitously. We met in a Starbucks, right? We kind of like coincidentally got to talk and then watched each other's laptop when the other one was in the bathroom, and then saw some kind of connection. And then essentially that grew into like a beautiful kind of friendship that set us up in different ways, emotionally and professionally, and made us actually meet the key people that we needed to meet for our next endeavors. And so her point was that like, your definition of success is wrong. Like, your definition of success is that you're thinking about it as that you have to stay together forever. But her definition of success in that moment was to say, well, it set us on beautiful paths for our lives. And maybe it wasn't meant to be that we're together, but we really kind of accelerated each other. And so I felt like that was really something I learned throughout the book, that like, you know, my definition of success in a lot of areas was very different from what I expected it would be.
Oh, it's good that your publisher had that input. So we do have a question here. It's from David Smith on chat. He says, isn't it true that when someone tells their success story, it contains less truth than someone telling their failure story? Example, you use as a CEO telling board they have more control than they really have. So yeah, what's your response to that? I think that's an interesting point.
It's a fantastic point. And I mean, both stories might still contain a lot of kind of things we add to look better, I guess, right? But both the quote unquote failure, because I feel like most people who tell failure stories tell it out of the comfort of now being successful, right? I've rarely seen people who tell failure stories when they are in the failure and it's their first failure, because it's very tough to then have the credibility to actually say, okay, but this is actually, you know, it has real gravitas. But having said that, so with those CEOs, for example, if I take that as an example, it's completely true. And that's actually what was one of the kind of key themes that came out of it, to say, it feels relieving to be able to talk about things that didn't work, or it feels relieving to talk about things that they didn't plan, because actually it feels more genuine, it feels more truthful, it feels like, hey, this is how life actually unfolds. And funny enough, people actually then relate more to them, right? Because they're like, yeah, we knew that all the way, so why don't you just tell us that anyways, right? Because a lot of times people think if they tell their success stories, people just believe it, but actually people know that this is not how life works. And so I found that interesting here at the moment with Governor Cuomo. You know, he missed a lot of the things at the moment, like he missed kind of the initial COVID and he got a lot of heat for that. But what he did really well was that he set himself up for being able to tell truthful stories by not saying, I have an exact plan here and I know exactly when what happens, which then would incentivize lying, right? Because you then always have to say, oh, but this information was wrong when we got it and whatever. He did the opposite. He said, hey, I have two principles, economic and kind of like, you know, health considerations. And once we tick those boxes, I will open up. And here's an approximate plan. And I believe it might be on June 15th that this happens, but based on new data, I will have to rearrange this. And that's how he built a lot of trust with people, because they were like, look, at least he's not pretending that he knows it all, but he's essentially saying, I have a plan in the sense of I can give you a sense of direction, but also I'm humble enough to say we don't have all the data yet. And I think that is the kind of approach that incentivizes truer stories because in a way, you don't even have to see anything as a failure. Even now, if the rate of infections would go up again, we would still be on his side because he essentially set it up in a way that he made us part of that journey. And so I feel like that kind of like was a really interesting inclusive approach to put that. But I think it's a great question that like a lot of times there's much more to learn from failure stories, both because that's like, you know, what's interesting, but also because people tend maybe to be a bit more truthful. That's true. Hero stories rarely seem to be true. There's the great paper, those of you who have a nerdy side, there's a great paper actually on how we should never learn from people who are completely outperforming, because a lot of times they're complete outliers. There's not a lot to learn from their stories because they took immeasurable risk, right? If you look at I don't want to name names, but if you look at some people who are very high in politics, used to be very high in business, those kind of people took risks that other people wouldn't take. So there's not that much to learn, versus the second and third tier, there's a lot to learn because they usually have like a couple of patterns we can learn from.
So we all shouldn't try to be Elon Musk, in other words.
I haven't looked into Elon Musk. I have looked into other people that shall not be named, but yeah.
Serial entrepreneur seems to do everything, you know, he's constantly doing something, create, you know, Tesla or whatever, you know, it's the space exploration. He's just into so many different pockets, and I would say he's definitely an outlier. But anyhow, I remember when I first came to Silicon Valley, and I would talk to people at various networking events, and they would say, oh, but you know, I'm on, you know, my first startup failed, I'm on my second or third startup. This never happened on the East Coast, but when I came out to the West Coast, it was very common to get this kind of attitude, like, oh, well, it's all right to fail. I'm onto something else now. Mm-hmm. Okay, we do have another question here, and it's from Hal Kelman. He really likes your presentation, and he says you can make your own luck. That's definitely true. Move from New York to Silicon Valley, which I just talked about, and work for 4 noted VCs like I did. Hal Kelman says he did. The hard part is convincing them that you can add value. And he says his former client and the only VC in Microsoft that was very humble and honest about how hard it is for entrepreneurs. Bill Gates thought Microsoft would only get to 200 employees. So I guess, you know, is thinking big is part of luck? You know, you have to think big and bold, or not.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, and thank you so much, David and Harold, for the great questions and comments. And one thing that I felt was between the lines almost was also the kind of networks that we're part of, right? Are we part of a kind of Silicon Valley, like kind of entrepreneurial, accelerated environment where serendipity happens a lot, right? Because people might be open to it and people might be used to it and they might be, versus like, I mean, a lot of my work, I mean, you know, I'm from Germany, so if you're, and I used to live in London for a long time, and you know, the kind of mindset in some parts, you know, comes different than in others. And what I found fascinating is, in a way, that kind of different base level of serendipity, right? So in terms of, depending on the community you're in, especially in low-income contexts, you have serendipity, but the kind of serendipity is obviously not as accelerated, and usually it's quite different from like settings like, exactly, if you're working with the top 4 people in the world on something, it's very likely that they bring other people who then can accelerate things very quickly if something happens, and so on. And so I feel like I've been very fascinated about this also from a societal inequality perspective, because if you think about it in terms of how do you get people who are less privileged into those kind of networks, what are easy ways, behavioral changes that allows them to do that? And to give you one small example, I mean, one thing that we've done, for example, is to say, okay, if you're like someone who just came out of prison and who has not a lot of social capital, there's not a lot you can do, what are ways that you can still open up social capital? And so one way, for example, we've done is to say, okay, go to open events like, you know, in this case, it would be Stanford. In our case, it was like LSE or like NYU or something else. And, you know, go to whenever there's like an absolute like interesting speaker where there will be like 400, 500 people. And then when that person speaks, you'll be the first one who asks the question. And the way you do that is you go up energetically, like not too much, but like in a way that nobody can really ignore you. And so then you stand up and you're like, you make it completely about the speaker, right? So you're like, thank you so much for your inspiring presentation. That was wonderful. as someone who just went through XYZ transition, I was wondering if you have XYZ advice for me. And so they bring in a half sentence of whatever they feel comfortable about sharing that could be a potential hook. And the beautiful thing here is that afterwards, there's always 5 or 6 people who would come back to them from the audience who would be like, such a coincidence, my brother just went through that period, I want to connect you. Such a coincidence, my employer currently is looking for someone who might be XYZ. The point here is that we just found 500 people who could somehow react to something that at the moment defines us. And I think these kind of small behavioral shifts I find fascinating, because again, we might assume that we don't have access to that high level kind of network if we're not part of it. But actually, there's always people in those kind of networks we can access in some kind of ways if we smartly kind of package it in some way or the other. And so that's what I'm most fascinated about, is where I feel serendipity can be a great leveler also, because it can be something where if we give people the opportunity to connect the dots for us, they actually start connecting them for us.
Sure, and this is a good point for all of you who are listening online, that if you chat or ask a really good question, you're going to be highlighted. Like I just highlighted Hal Kelman and David Smith. So please stay with us, because we're going to go to our next session, which will be our VC session, the venture capital part of our entire forum here. So, okay, let's switch screens. So Christian, you need to stop sharing and I need to start sharing.
Yeah, I'll stop.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
wonderful.
right. Very
Well,
good. Thank you so much. That was really very interesting. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to get luckier. Because, you know, it's a challenging time right now for everyone. And that's actually one of the reasons I wanted you to speak with us today, because I think if people can kind of instill this in their own lives, that maybe they will have better outcomes, because right now it's extremely challenging time to raise money, to raise financing, to break through. And, you know, a lot of things are being disrupted. So there's quite a lot of new opportunity as well. So how you navigate that, I think, depends upon your attitude in part, I think in large part. So thank you, Christian, and good luck with your book launch.
Thank you so much, and great to meet you.
Where we can get your book on Amazon, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the wonderful event, Rebecca. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no, stay around with us with all these top VCs coming on next. Okay, and I hope that they're all here sharing their screen. So we need Kamran, Mason, Melissa, Sean. I see Sean. And Douglas, I see here, but all right. There's Melissa. Thank you, Melissa. All right, Robin. Robin, tune in.
I'm here.
Oh, where are you? Oh, okay. All right, good. So I think maybe we have, we're missing Kamran.
I'm here as well.
Cameron's here. I see Sean.
Yep.
I don't see it. Well, all right. Well, let's launch into this. And why don't we each introduce ourselves first, so that the audience has an idea where you're coming from and what you're focused on. There, hi, Kamran. Thanks for joining us. And you know, I'm just really happy to have this great group of panelists here, because you know, these are all people who are experts in their field, and they're making time to be with us today and speak to all of you. And of course, you know, we are recording this episode, so if you couldn't get here live, you know, and we will be sharing out the replay to all those who signed up for the event. So, okay, we're going to be going for about 45 minutes here and covering a lot of ground about, you know, post-COVID-19 and right in the middle of COVID-19, and what's being funded, and what are some of the new technologies that are coming up, and how are you handling fundraising and pitching from startups during this time? Just how are you coping? Let's, Kamran, we'll start with you. And if you could just say, you know, a few brief words to introduce yourself and tell what you're working on.
Sure. Kamran Ansari. I'm a VC with Greycroft, based out of New York. And focused a lot in the fintech and commerce space. I've also spent time on the operating side. First at a company called My Yearbook, which became Meet Me, and then more recently at Pinterest, where I ran strategy and corporate development. And it's good to be here.
Good, thank you, Kamran. And I know everyone is in a different, well, a lot of people are tuning in from different places. I'm in Silicon Valley. I know Sean is on the East Coast, Robin's on the East Coast, Melissa is in the Northeast, Mason is joining us, I believe, from New York. So Robin, why don't we go with you next?
Sure. Hey, I'm Robin. I'm with GGB Capital. GGB is a global VC and been around for about 20 years now. I cover specifically consumer internet, which includes e-commerce, social media, digital media, and urban tech.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Melissa, I see your photo on here next.
Yep. Hi, I'm Melissa Guzy. I'm the founding partner of Arbor Ventures. We're a global fintech fund. I normally am in Singapore, but as you can see, the picture behind me is in Maine, where I am until Singapore opens back up.
Yeah, that looks so beautiful there.
It is, but it's pouring rain today. That's just a photo from the other day.
Oh, okay. Well, you're making us all very envious. I'm so tired of seeing my same neighborhood here in Silicon Valley. I've been in the same town for 3 months now and doing the same walks, trying to figure out a different walk every day, but it's getting a little boring. But not online, but just in the real world out there. Okay, Mason Du from HBS Alumni Angels. Hi, Mason.
Hello, Mason Du. I'm actually currently in Manhattan. We're opening up over slowly. HBS Angels, we're one of the largest angel group here in New York City. About 360 plus angel members, and then we've been writing checks to early stage startups. So usually we're one of the first checks. Done about 80 companies over the past years, and then last year we had a record year, about 3 million deployed. And we also are a member of multiple other chapters with other HBS alumni angels. So quite a good network of people. And then in terms of companies we invest, does not have to have any affiliation with HBS or the school at all. So open to any interesting ideas.
Oh, so you actually network with other alumni groups from Harvard Business School in other geographies?
For the companies we invest in, we syndicate out to multiple other angel groups as well.
Oh,
and also other chapters of HBS angels, yeah.
Okay, well that definitely extends the reach. Okay, Sean O'Sullivan.
Hello, I'm Sean O'Sullivan from SOSV, and we are a very active investor in the life sciences area and in the hardware area and in China, actually, and Asia through our Chinaccelerator and MOX programs. So we invest, we just crossed our 1,000th investment in, over the last 10 years, just last month. And we do generally 150 new startups every year through our IndieBio, Hacks, and other accelerator programs. And we also follow on into those companies. We have about 700 million under management, 120 people.
Well, it's quite an illustrious group here. Thank you all for being with us. So, look, let's start a panel discussion here talking about what you're seeing as, I guess I'm interested, are you busier than ever now or not? I think I'm busier than ever, but I'm just curious to know, what about you in your own professional lives? Busier than ever?
Yeah.
Or not?
Definitely deploying record levels of capital and many follow-on rounds, especially I think there's a lot of people taking advantage of sort of topping back up in this period of uncertainty. And there's a lot of VCs that are looking to support their winners and close additional financing to make sure they can make it through to the other side. So I think that's causing a lot of activity for us. We probably have closed 60 deals in the last 60 days.
Wow.
But that's kind of our pace, follow-ons as well as the accelerator deals. But it's even faster than normal.
Faster than normal. How about others? Robin, Melissa?
Yeah, I think, you know, we had a period during when COVID hit, kind of just stepping back and, you know, making sure we take a health check of all the portfolio. And then there was the whole PPP phase. Right now, I think things are starting to go back to normal. We actually did a couple of deals where we've never met the team before, but all virtually, which is not typical. Like we wouldn't have done that in the past, but I think times are changing and we're certainly kind of excited. We're seeing a lot of tailwinds from COVID, right? Whether it's in productivity, in e-commerce, in community. And so I think, you know, we will continue to make investments in a lot of areas and actually have been quite busy as well, but we aren't necessarily in a rush to deploy. But when we see exciting companies, we're even in some of our own portfolio, like Sean said, we're doubling down as well. So
Okay.
quite a bit of that.
Right. Yeah, Melissa.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, see, we've spent a lot of our time on the portfolio, which I thoroughly enjoy, and was like, okay, this is great. I can really spend time with the CEOs and think about what's next post-COVID, how the world's changing, think about product market fit, all the things I really enjoy doing with the portfolio companies. So we took a breather. We're starting to look at new investments now, but we're not in any rush. I actually think it'll be very unlikely we'll pull the trigger before September. I really believe we're a little bit in a false front here. And just, you know, if we see something extraordinary, we'll do it. But the bar is quite high at the moment. And I think we're spending a lot of time internally thinking about where we want to invest and what sectors are going to be, you know, really have the tailwinds. As Robin said, we've doubled down on our own portfolio of the companies that are working. And I have to say that I think, you know, it's been very interesting to watch the tailwinds behind certain sectors. I don't think we've seen, you know, a downturn in venture where you had, you know, it wasn't sort of universal where you saw some industries just really accelerating. And I think we're spending a lot of time thinking about that right now.
Sounds good. All right.
But I'm busier than ever, and working 2 ends of the day with Asia, you know, is a little challenging.
Yeah, the middle of the day is not quite so busy, but the beginning for the first half and the end of the evening is very busy.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can relate. Mason, how about for you? You're right in the heart there of Manhattan, where you've seen everything for the last couple of months.
Yeah, it is quite a lot. Overall, I think similar theme in terms of existing portfolio companies. We are seeing a lot of new applicants for just new deal flows coming into our pipelines. We're actually increasing the number of our pitch events. We used to do it once a month where, you know, all of the members get together in person. This is before COVID. Now all of those are virtual. Now we're trying to have a interim, so almost twice a month type of pitch events, just to give more spotlights to company startups that are raising or are for specific cause that we care about. And overall, I would say the pace of investment hasn't really gone down since COVID. And also because of the whole virtual aspects, we're opening ourselves up to a lot more opportunities. It used to be the members are generally looking at tri-state areas. Now there's actually a lot more appetite for just any companies that are fits in the investment criteria our members have, and doesn't have to be a specific location that are close to New York, which is a nice positive development, I would say.
Right, Kamran.
Yeah, I think we're quite busy in terms of certainly follow-ons and portfolio support. We've done some new deals as well, and I think we're also seeing quite a bit of M&A activity. So that's one area where the portfolio has been quite busy, where we have a number of companies I think are being opportunistic right now about finding acquisition targets that maybe priced correctly or have a moment in time where they're being attractive for acquisition. So I think we're seeing that activity. We're also doing fundraising. I mean, we've had a couple of funds in progress that we've been putting together, and I think for the most part, if it's with existing LPs that you've had relationships with for years, that's gone pretty smoothly. I think it would be tough to kind of get new folks you've never met in the past to kind of put money together for a new fund. But, I think that's all been good. I think that the thing that's been challenging is, and I was just on the phone earlier with one of my partners, is a lot of the serendipitous conversation you have in the hallway, that stuff's kind of gone away. So you just sort of, you realize you haven't talked to somebody in a couple of months and there's all kinds of stuff that you don't know that's happening. Because the Zooms and stuff tend to be focused on deals.
Yeah, well, that's why I try to make ours a little bit more personal. Where, I like to know where people are and what they're doing and how they're coping. So why don't we ask that of everyone? Where are you and how are you coping in this new normal? Kamran, we'll start with you.
Okay. I'm down in Virginia now, where my wife's family is from. So, but I was back in Manhattan. I'm normally based in New York. I was back in Manhattan the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
To kind of check on the apartment and make sure everything was okay. And I picked a kind of interesting couple of weeks, I think, to be there. And then left a couple of days ago to come back to Virginia.
Well, you were there during the looting then, right?
I was, yes, during the curfew, and I was there for 2 weeks. The first week was things were starting to feel like they were kind of coming back to normal, and then the second week between the protests and the curfew and the boarding up of all the stores, it took a different turn.
Okay, but at least things were safe there. Your apartment survived and so forth.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, Mason.
Manhattan, heart of Ashton. I think I've been inside for way too long.
Way too long.
Yeah, we'll see how the opening up goes over the coming month. But overall, I think due to the lack of childcare options, it makes it actually quite difficult for anyone who has little ones at home. We have two, so it's been quite difficult, I would say. But we're treasuring the time we have with them right now, which is nice. Definitely craving for a better new normal where there's some type of supports. Even I think nanny's not a essential worker, so they're technically not allowed out right now. Schools aren't open, so we'll have to see how that gets sorted out.
I see. Yeah. It's something that has kind of been overlooked in the news. I think, because we tend to concentrate on the high drama things, but being there at home with two young kids or young children, and trying to do your work at the same time, and then maybe even with two people trying to get on the internet at the same time, that's challenging. Melissa, it must be really serene there in Maine, but I know that you're online all the time, so.
Yeah, no, it's quite serene here. But I packed a suitcase late January to go away for Chinese New Year, and never did I imagine when I packed for 10 days it would be 19 weeks. So I keep laughing. The next time I pack a suitcase, I'll probably overpack pretty substantially. So, but I think you deal with it, and I'm happy. At least I have a home here. I'm going to spend some time here. Singapore gave me a return slot September 23rd, so I just make the best of it. Work from here, but yeah, I mean, just make sure you get some exercise and get outside. I think, as Mason said, if you're stuck in the house all day long every day, I think that gets pretty wearing. But try to get outside. But yeah, I mean, overall dealing with it pretty well. Miss my dog, miss my house. Those clothes that I brought with me for those 10 days, I'll probably burn. Never want to see them again. But otherwise, everything's fine.
Okay, good.
It's lucky to be healthy right now when you watch what's going on.
Oh yeah, definitely. Robin.
My background is our office in the Bay Area, but I'm in New Jersey, so haven't flown for a while. It's actually quite nice. I was on maternity leave actually, and they came back for about a few weeks, and then been working from home ever since. So it's actually quite a silver lining to be with my 7-month-old.
Yeah. Oh, well, good.
Sean? Good timing.
Yeah, good timing. That's serendipity, at work.
Definitely.
And I'm in Princeton, New Jersey, so not too far away, I'm sure, from Robin and from the New Yorkers. And I was actually in Spain at the start of just when they closed down the European travel. It was sort of the height of their quarantine period. And I had to go into quarantine when I came back to the US. And then out of that, I helped set up some diagnostic. We do a lot of work in life sciences. So we're doing a lot of things across diagnostics, like the testing services to see if you have the virus, serological tests to see if you had the virus, as well as other therapeutics. We have antivirals and that hopefully will make the disease non-fatal. And we also have antibody therapies that give a temporary immunity. And all those should be coming to market in the fall or maybe the late summer. So we're hoping that makes some big difference. And the testing services have been hugely helpful as well. So I was in New York also helping set up our IndieBio New York program, which is an inaugural program. Actually was this during the middle of the virus. So none of the teams, so we're doing that all virtually now. We were supposed to be at Rockefeller University, running out of labs there. So, but IndieBio's labs in San Francisco are still open. It's an essential service. And we have diagnostic devices that are coming out that pretty soon, hopefully all of you will be able to use. It's a $200 device with like a $5 or $10 cartridge that goes in and tells you whether or not you're active with the virus. So basically every office should have one and just test frequently so you can make sure that everyone is okay. But it won't be scaled into millions of units until August, September sort of timeframe. So it's coming down the road, but there will hopefully be on the second. I know that New York's been through a pretty big first wave. California is about to get your first wave. You're starting to see something there, and other parts of the country are getting the first wave or haven't had it, don't even see it coming yet. But it's going to be a hell of a ride until we actually have a good therapeutic or something that makes it non-fatal, or like a vaccine, but that could be a long time.
Right. So how many of you have pivoted to some sort of COVID-19 solution as a result of this pandemic?
Well, we have, I'll just start because we have 36 companies that are doing things against COVID from a lot of different life sciences and also robots and whatnot for disinfection technologies from China to Europe, and lab automation robots, things like that are seeing their sales go massively higher during this period. So we've seen some surprisingly good benefits there. But on the other hand, we've also seen lots of manufacturing companies that needed to shut down and furlough all the workers because of all of that. But in turn, we also had one of our partners, Brad Higgins, who got the virus, and he was in the ICU. His whole family, his whole house got it. So his wife got it, he got it, and his wife's mother got it. She died. She was also in the ICU. He got out of the ICU, but he's, recovering. And I think that's sort of another untold story, is how many people don't do that well. Some of the people who don't go into the ICU are fine. It's just the flu, basically, or whatever. You don't even know you had it. But if you do have it and you're in the ICU, a third of the people actually end up with permanent mental damage. Brad, none of that happened. He only had one of the lungs was impacted, but he can't, he walks 100 feet and then he has to rest. He can't walk up a flight of stairs without having to rest. He works out of his bed. So there's a tremendous amount of people that are just counting up the 110,000 dead or the 130,000 dead, whatever it is in the US, and just saying, oh, it's just the dead. It's actually a lot more than the dead. It's the people that have permanent lifelong disability that I think that's the reason to not just sort of let the genie out of the box and let it run over the whole population. So China's done a good job of locking it, putting the genie back in the bottle.
It's true. Who else? Anyone else who has pivoted to a COVID-19 solution?
We're definitely giving priorities to companies that are solving problems related to COVID, and even now related to the racial tension as well. So it's definitely, it's been our, kind of the theme for us for the past, ever since. Yeah.
I was going to ask that. I mean, this is the other big thing that's been going on is the racial unrest and the riots, the protests. And so one of the VCs that I had on our show, Ask a VC Anything's, talked about they were opening up 2 hours each week just to pitches from minority entrepreneurs. And I'm just curious, you think that that's effective? Or anyone else doing something like that to, kind of even the odds?
Well, I think it should be the norm. I mean, I think, depending on what you focus on and where you are, but at the end of the day, being open to having a whole, a variety of entrepreneurs from different backgrounds is the right thing to do. So, but one comment I will follow on a little bit, I haven't lived in the US for 15 years. And all I can say is, like, oh my, like, this is like such a shock because, in Asia, people have listened about wearing masks and social distancing.
Yeah.
And I'm American and grew up here, and I haven't been here for 15 years. And just to watch I think, as Sean said, I mean, we had 25 cases in the portfolio across the world of COVID. And I think the thing people don't talk about is there's a lot of people who may not be in the ICU, but are having lung issues for a very long period, or now having lung issues. I know people who've had it in February, but, I mean, social responsibility of social distancing and wearing a mask, it is very interesting for me to return to the US and sort of see this. Because I do think Asia, people have listened, and you can see it coming out of this in a much more organized manner so far. But no idea where the end is for the US right now on COVID.
Yeah, I really hope we don't have to go back into lockdown again.
I don't think that's possible in the US. I just don't think people will listen. I don't know what others think.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not.
I think it will be necessary. And, I think it'll be necessary once kids start going back to school and there's too much virus out there and it takes too long for people to stop shedding. It's not like a cold. You can only pass it along for 3 or 5 days or something. A lot of people have the virus and they keep it, even if asymptomatically, they keep it for 30 days or 40 days. And that is the shocker. So there are people that don't even know they have it. They're passing it along to other people who don't know they have it. By the time school comes around, there'll be a lot of people that are going to be cross-infecting each other. If, it depends on whether or not people do the tracking and tracing, which I haven't really seen being done yet. So if that actually happens, then maybe it becomes a different game and we can sort of put the genie back in the bottle. Or if there's universal testing, millions of people tested every day, but we're at a far, far, far cry from that now.
Yeah. So what happened to the contact tracing? That Google was developing and these tech companies out here were developing. What happened to that? Why hasn't it been used? Is it privacy
Lack
issues
of will.
here?
Lack of will, I'd say. Yeah.
Cameron, what do you think?
I actually think it's, I know New York State and New York City have put together, I think New York City has like 1,700 tracers now, and they called to hire people. So I think it's sort of state by state and municipality by municipality, how organized they are around it. But I think to Sean's point, you have to get to some minimum level of containment before tracing even is feasible.
Okay.
And I've been to retail stores recently where nobody's had taken my contact information, or anything. I mean, it's very different. Like if you, even just going into Taiwan, even before the coronavirus, every time you go into your hotel, they're taking your temperature. They make you show that you're, your papers as to where you traveled and things like that. There's just a different culture in the United States so far. I think, it's amazing. I mean, New York, I think, has done a great job, the best job of any, in terms of clamping down. They have very lower rate of pass-alongs right now, but it did take 0.25% of the city to be killed. I mean, 0.25% of New York City is already dead, you know, and it goes up every day. So it's like, will it have to be 0.5% for all the other cities for them to notice? I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of people dying, and not that many people actually. In fact, I'm sorry to be such a bummer on all this stuff, but it's just. But
well,
it's a real threat.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Robin, I want to bring you in and ask you, you know, about e-commerce trends, and certainly this is an area that must be benefiting quite a bit from the change in the new normal. And so, I mean, I'd like to have everyone's opinion on how your own companies are adjusting to this, and how you're investing in new types of companies in this new era. So Robin, I know you focus a lot on e-commerce, so can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. This is definitely a sector that was challenged, both like from a positive standpoint and negative standpoint, right? Like on the positive side, you have a lot of surges, which Kamran and I share a portfolio company, Boxed, in New York, that delivers paper goods and household essentials, and just a lot of demand. But on the fulfillment side in the beginning, right, you have warehouse workers, and how do you actually make sure you're putting everybody in a situation where you're safe, right, and coming to work. And so I think by and large, a lot of our portfolio companies, whether it's StockX that do the sneaker authentication and sales, to Boxed, who have warehouses as well, and Yami Buy, just thinking through the safety and guidelines on the back end, and then to make sure like they can continue to move forward. They've all been very much positively benefited from the e-commerce trends and penetration. I mean, we're just seeing that across e-commerce, healthcare, right? Like things that people can't go out of their house than they normally do, and consuming. And so what's exciting is, especially in commerce on the fresh and perishable side, we're seeing people are opening up to traditionally you may want to just go and pick out your own avocados and have a feel for it. But surveys are showing that people are definitely more open to pickup, delivery, curbside pickup, etc. as well. So that's encouraging. The other piece that we're very excited about is actually the infrastructure and the back end of e-commerce. And so we invest in a lot of companies in the space, whether it's on the fintech payment side, to supply chain optimization. So one of our portfolio companies we recently doubled down in helps marketplace merchants optimize their supply chain. And how do you manage not just overstock, but understock, when to order, how to price. And these merchants are, you know, multi-million-dollar merchants that sell on Amazon, have global supply chains. So definitely like post-COVID, the shift will be here to stay, just like how it was in China when China went through SARS for the first time, right? And so we're very excited about the consumer behavior and shifts that are happening. Yeah,
I was hearing that Starbucks is changing its delivery system where you basically you just come up to the window and it's sort of the on-demand coffee, right? Rather than going in and lingering in the store or in the shop. So
yeah, I mean, even
hundreds of stores.
Before COVID, 80% were mobile for them. So, and pickup, right? Order ahead. So if you can imagine, like before that, you already had that huge adoption. Now you're shifting to, hey, what are other formats? And for food, especially, we have a couple portfolio like Slice on the pizza side, enabling order pickup, order delivery, contactless serving, and Odeco on the coffee front as well, right? So
cash was already pretty much dead in many cities and many more advanced economies such as China. But now I would assume that that's the end of cash, right? I mean, Melissa, you do a lot of fintech investing. Is this the end of cash altogether?
We could only hope so. Yeah, I mean, clearly in Asia, even, you know, China led the way. More and more governments are trying to put effort behind removing cash. At least now they can advertise cash is dirty. So let's, you know, move to more digital payments. But yeah, I think the growth in digital payments will only continue, facilitated by COVID. But the flip side of of digital payments is also fraud, which is a space we love, anti-fraud. And as e-commerce has grown, as Robin was speaking, I was thinking, yes, it's been great for all of our anti-fraud companies as well. So yeah, I think cash continues to dwindle. I mean, there'll be people who will always argue that you need cash. But I'm here in a small town in Maine, and I pretty much am getting everyone on Venmo. This idea that you can, like telling them set up a Venmo account so you can get paid, because I don't really want to pay you in cash for this or that. So I do think, it's times like this where behavior changes, whether it's 3 clicks or 3 months or whatever it is. Once a habit is formed, I think it sticks. Yeah. And, I'm working my best in a small town right now to push digital payments as much as I can, because I don't really want to go to the ATM machine.
Sure. Well, I became a Venmo believer when I was out peddling my book. And people say, well, I don't have cash. I'd be at a book talk and say, oh, I want to buy the book. I say, well, okay, well, how can I buy? Okay, finally I got Venmo, and boom, you're like, okay, Venmo on every book sale. What?
You're getting rid of cart abandonment, right? The idea that somebody wanted it, you're able to fulfill it by taking Venmo or another digital payment.
Right.
I think it continues.
Right. So online entertainment is another sector that's really benefiting. And Kamran, I know you've spent a lot of time with Pinterest and some other companies in that sector. Can you talk a little bit about online entertainment?
Sure.
Even I got a Netflix subscription.
Oh, really? Yeah, I mean, look, I think everyone's trying new stuff, and we're seeing in the portfolio, we're seeing surges not just in online content consumption in terms of entertainment, but gaming certainly is seeing a big uptick. So we have a couple of companies that do online or social gaming, and you're seeing a lot of that traffic increasing as well.
Yeah.
And I think to the point that others have made, e-commerce is certainly growing in a big way. Even e-commerce that I would not have thought. For example, we have a company that does B2B e-commerce, and I would have thought the sort of SMBs in B2B would not be heavily shopping right now. But I think just the shift to digital has outweighed the overall reduction in kind of volumes, maybe in terms of business purchases. And then another area is even luxury goods. I would have thought you would see staples and things like, paper goods, stuff that our company Box sells. But again, we have another company that helps people buy things like furniture or, jet skis. I mean, things are more expensive, higher end purchases that I would think would be more discretionary. And again, I think the trend has been those things are still being bought, or at least whoever's buying them can't buy them in a store anymore. So it's moving online. So we're seeing shifts in those areas, and then obviously we're seeing declines elsewhere. I mean, things like companies that sell software, that's been soft. Companies that are in the marketing and advertising area, that's been very hard hit. Travel certainly has been hard hit, as you know.
Oh yeah. I'm finally going to take a flight in about 2 weeks. Has anyone else flown anywhere? No, nobody else. Okay. I may be the first in this group. But anyhow, Alaska Airlines told me they're going to keep the middle seat open. And they specifically told me that when I called for a seat assignment. They said, we're keeping the middle seat open. I said, okay, that's good. And they said, and you have to wear a mask. And I said, yes, okay. So I'm all prepped. Mason, how about you? I mean, are you changing your technology investing, or how are you adapting your portfolio?
I think as a group, we haven't really changed that drastically, just because the member base is quite diverse. We have, over 360 members. So each one of them have their own investment thesis. Personally, I'm more invested in crypto these days.
Crypto? Just
in terms of new investments. Right?
Oh yeah?
I think, what we're seeing with COVID is it's accelerating a lot of pre-existing trends that's already happening. So you see it in e-commerce, you see it in remote working, you see it in esports, you see it in, there's a lot of these things that are already budding for a while. And then it's just, it's a sudden shift that just greatly accelerated those. And then I think there are things that would probably happen in crypto in the 5-10 years time. We'll see what happens. But personally, I'm shifting slightly into that space.
Okay. What about fitness clubs? Who's going to rejoin? Who's going to go back to the fitness club? Nobody? Nobody. I canceled my membership. But,
Yeah,
you
one
know,
of our portfolio is Peloton, and we've continued to see the rise in membership, right? And just riding that work from home tailwind and all the digital consumption that you can have in one platform, right? Shared by the household.
well, you know, I decided I'm enjoying biking and walking so much. And I figured I can do this almost the same kind of exercises at home that I can, or outside as I can in the gym. So,
I like the use of the expression fitness club, Rebecca. I haven't heard that in a while.
Oh, you mean we're so unfit now that nobody talks about being fit?
No, I like that. I'm gonna, if I ever go back to my gym, I will now call it a fitness club.
Okay, a social club. I don't know.
Fitness studio.
Fitness studio. Yes. Well, there you go. Yes. Well, so a lot of them are offering online classes, and you know, it's been interesting too that, you know, how much time are you spending on Zoom every day? Who's doing more than 5 hours a day?
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
Who's doing more than 5 hours a day on Zoom? Raise your hand if you are. More, okay,
Some
more
days.
than 8 hours a day?
Rarely.
No. Who's sick of Zoom? I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So,
I see people moving back, Rebecca, to phone calls. It's like not everything has
Yeah.
to be a Zoom, you know. You can just call somebody.
yeah. No, I've been doing a lot of interviews lately on Zoom, and it's been, you know, it's been interesting. Some people want to do the Zoom, and other people are a little bit shy about it. So basically, if I haven't taken a shower, I'll do a phone call. You know, I better do a phone call instead of show my face. But okay, let's get a little more serious. How about companies that you have to rescue now? How many of them? What percentage of your portfolio do you see not being able to make it during these difficult times? Or because we had this job growth just came out on Friday, is the worst already over?
Well, I'll just go first because I probably have the worst numbers in terms of survivability anyway. I think the thing that's generally true is for most VCs, you know, you're a genius if you get, it's the only field in which you can be a genius if you get one investment out of 10 right? So that's certainly true today as it was in the past. But at the accelerator level, you know, because we're pre-seed, you know, and then there's a certain survivability of seed, and then there's certain survivability of the A's, et cetera. We see, you know, probably 60% of our companies over a 10-year period where they don't survive, and 20% of the portfolio that, you know, pays for everything else. So what, you know, so we would normally see around a 5 to 12% sort of, you know, of our portfolio dying almost every year. Like, and that's okay with us because we back 150 new companies a year. So that's all right. So, and it's an early enough stage, but I'd say this year we'll probably see at least double that, because there is just so much uncertainty that angels have put their hands in their pockets, you know, for the most part. You know, for some reason the stock market is still going up, or maybe not today. I guess it fell 5% or something. But but in general, like this space of you know, early stage investing, I think you're going to see angels putting their hands in their pockets, and I think you'll see a lot of seed investors also slowing down at their pace of investing.
Okay, who else would like to comment?
I mean, the only comment I'll make, and maybe it's the nature of our portfolio, and thankfully we have a global portfolio, but I would say the companies who had really good product market fit before COVID still have good product market fit and are able to maneuver their way through really well. And I'd say the companies that were struggling with product market fit are still struggling with product market fit. Fortunately for us, they just happen to have been companies who have plenty of cash to get through the end of 2021. But I do think it takes a very unique entrepreneur to maneuver through this, think about product market fit, not only today, but post-COVID. And, you know, I think that's a place where we're spending a fair amount of time. But I think for us in the portfolio, we're not going to see the casualties were going to be the casualties before COVID. And I don't think we're going to see any differential because of where they are in having enough cash to get through this. I mean, we're pretty much very fortunate. No one needs cash until, you know, mid 2021 right now. But that was just luck. Let's, you know.
Wow. So what kind of runway should portfolio companies have? Should they have 1 year, 2 years?
We're saying 24 months. And yeah, 24 months. I think it's because I went through the downturn of 2001 in venture, the oldest one on the panel, but it was pretty much it was pretty tough. And as Sean said, not only did angels put their hands in their pocket, every single VC put their hands in their pocket and were only focused on their own portfolio. It was a time where venture capitalists gave back money to LPs, and it was a very difficult time. And so I think we just, you know, took a very, a view that this was going to be a very challenging time early, made sure burn rates were cut. People raised money when they could opportunistically raise over the last year. And so we're just in a position where not a lot of the companies, we don't have anybody who needs cash now till 2021, but that was just luck.
Luck, yeah. So what about looking at this geographically? Is this changing the way that you look at regions of the world? Because today, you know, you don't have to have someone close by to you. You could, you know, do a deal across oceans.
I think it's I think it's almost the exact opposite of some of that. I mean, just because, you know, for one thing, you know, this whole globalization is much, much harder to do when you've got these quarantine periods where you've got to hang out for 2 weeks. If you were to go to China, number one, you have to, you know, get in through, you know, hopping into different countries first and before you can go there. But then secondly, you've got 2 weeks in the foreigner hotels where they let you, you know, get quarantined, and then you have to, then you have the ability to stay there. But then when you come back, you have a quarantine wherever you're going back to as well. So this whole globalization has got a big break, you know, a handbrake that's been applied pretty strongly for a little bit of time. That said, if you already have your supply chain set up and everything else, and you already have people locally, we're continuing investing globally because we're a global VC. We've backed startups in 70 some odd countries. So we're going to obviously continue that, but it does slow the pace. It slows the pace of innovation, I'd say, as well, and certainly mobility.
Mm-hmm. But what about remote working? With remote working, you know, the tech talent can go wherever. So will this impact where you're investing, that you might start to invest more in the flyover country of the U.S., the flyover country of the U.S., the forgotten cities?
I think so. Yeah, I think loads of people are. I mean, you've seen people say the remote first companies, right? Did Slack say that as well as Twitter? Remote first, and then they'll also have offices. That's a really interesting idea. Yeah. And certainly it can reduce the, you know, Facebook is doing the same thing. Unfortunately, they'll change your salary if you move to a different, cheaper area, evidently, lower it. But that's, you know, to be expected. And, you know, it gives people a lot more flexibility with their lives. Yeah. One other thing I'd say is that, you know, the near-death experiences that your serendipity guy was talking about, this for most people is a near-death experience. This is a very transformational opportunity for startups. And it is with near-death experiences that, you know, startups begin to really focus. Too much funding is actually bad for startups because they're not listening to the customers. They're not focused on getting the revenue as quickly as possible. They're not actually talking as much about what the needs are, the pain points, and solving the one and only pain point because they have to get to revenue faster. They have to have they have to extend their runway in whatever way, so they can't build out a bloated product. So I think that this will produce wonderfully clear, product market fit optimizations in this period. And you'll see, I'd say, I think you could see, companies be more successful at a cheaper rate of deployment than you have since the financial crisis in 2008, where the valuations went down by half and the number of companies that got funded went down by half. And I think that may be where we're going into. I mean, even at SOSV, we normally accept 150 companies into our accelerator programs a year. This year, we slowed it down since March. So this year we'll probably just do 90. So it's a big slowing down of some of the companies and being more selective. I think probably a lot of people are thinking the same way.
Are other people seeing the same trends of the lower valuations and trends that Sean was just talking about?
I don't think we've seen some of that, and certainly companies that, there are companies that in the past were not as receptive to taking capital that I found are opportunistically open to fundraising now. So some of the kind of better later stage businesses, I think, are shoring up their balance sheets with opportunistic rounds. I've seen some of that happening. But I've not seen a lot of like heavy discounting per se on deals. I think that good companies are still, getting fairly healthy valuations. And I think to the point that Melissa was making, I do think that, if a company was doing poorly before, this has just maybe accelerated that path. If it was doing well, maybe it stands out even more now that it's one of the success stories in the portfolio. So I think COVID's been an accelerant of prior trends in many ways. There's been very few cases that I can think of where it's like it's reverse course in a company entirely, where a company was doing great, now it's doing terrible, or it's doing terrible, now it's doing great.
Yeah, well, I presume now is a good time to pivot.
Or stay the course if you're in a good spot. I mean, yeah,
it's a good time to actually rethink where you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it.
We're actually seeing. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you go, Robin.
Oh no, I was just saying that we're actually seeing. Kamran mentioned it earlier. Some consolidation in the market, right? Joining forces of companies where we traditionally see more of that in Asia, but starting to see that here. And the IPO window has opened back up, so I think it's very encouraging to a lot of investors as well.
So we have some folks here who are, well, most of you are global investors, and so with all the pushback against China, have you recalibrated how you're thinking about China? Okay, nobody wants to answer that one.
Well, I'll throw in. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely this whole supply chain issue is really a wake-up call for a lot of folks that were dependent or outsourced all their manufacturing. Say you're a European company and you outsourced all your manufacturing of medical supplies to China or the U.S. or or everywhere basically. People are really, really sensitive to that right now, and the supply chain's locking down, transportation problems, all those sorts of issues. And it hasn't been made any better by some poor leadership on the part of the U.S. government, or and even some more militaristic leadership in China, with China recently invading India, for example, things like that. So that's creating a lot of uncertainty when those things happen. And I'd say that does it change, like from our point of view, we're like half of our people are in China. So we're going to continue being a major investor into China, and it's the world's number 2 to be number 1 economy in the years to come. We'll still be in China for decades, but it does express the possibility that just like China had its own private internet, right? It does. Maybe some of the manufacturing supply chains are going to be broken apart, and there'll be different supply chains and in different industries, And that's all very, very much unknowable right now.
Right.
I think it would take a real change in leadership on all sides for people to feel differently.
Yeah. So what technology company do all of you think has done a good job in this new era? Who stands out in your mind? It just can be a person or a company. I know Governor Cuomo was brought up by Christian, but what about from the business side? Anyone stand out who you think has really shown leadership? That's what I thought. It's rather sorry state.
It probably wouldn't be Elon Musk, who is busy throwing all the toys out of the pram with the shutdown and the reopening of the Tesla factories and all that.
Yeah. Or maybe Bill Gates.
Bill Gates, absolutely.
Yeah, remarkable what he's done. I mean, but I think, probably, I don't know, maybe not for others, but for me, I think I've been so buried in our, focused on the portfolio. I just haven't. Yeah. But I mean, I obviously admire Gates for donating, putting the money forward for the vaccination. We need that, right?
So I'm just thinking about many of us are now working in different circumstances. We're out of the major cities. And so I just interviewed a major technology leader yesterday morning, and he was calling in from rural Virginia. He's usually in Washington, D.C. And the internet was really bad. And so, it just makes me think, the U.S. still has problems with broadband, universal communications. So this leads me to believe that maybe it's a good time to invest in some of these overlooked areas. And Silicon Valley, is in its own little cocoon here, very clubby and very focused on companies that fit the mold. So any of you thinking about these issues?
Well, I will say one thing about infrastructure, because having lived in Hong Kong 13 and a half of the years, I mean, I find many cities in the world with is great infrastructure where you can go into an elevator and it's wired, right? Or, it's got fiber optics, so you can have high-speed connection in the elevator, but that's Hong Kong, because, you shouldn't lose a minute a day from not being productive or working. But, I mean, Sand Hill Road hasn't had internet for a long time. You can barely get a phone connection, right? I think it is the difference between, the private sector having to pay for fiber and infrastructure versus the public sector. But, obviously, like there has been in the past, there's probably opportunities to get the U.S. Wired in a very different, or not wired, I should say, in a more updated manner. But, people don't understand the limitations of their internet connection unless they're actually using it. So, maybe now people will say, okay, we need, better connections in other parts of the U.S.
Right. Even New York City, I mean, I guess because there's so many tall apartment buildings all next to one another and business towers next to one another that sometimes the internet can be shaky there. So, Mason, have you experienced that during your quarantine period?
I think cellular could be difficult if you're midtown and going about different buildings. I think it's probably just due to current state of technology and physics. But if you're in any type of Wi-Fi coverage where, there are fiber or there are cables that are actually laid to wherever you are, it's been pretty fast and flawless. Yeah.
When are all of you going back to the office?
2021?
I don't think I am for the rest of the year. We might even take the first quarter of next year off, not going in, so.
Well, that's the first I've heard into next year. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea for most people not to go until next year, myself. But as soon as there's a good therapeutic, which could be as soon as November, I think people will be able to, as soon as it becomes a non-fatal disease, the infection fatality rate is around 1.5%, as near as we can tell, maybe a little bit higher. And obviously not for most people in our age. It's that it would be still even lower for people of our age. But so I just think I just think it's a good idea to not go in until it's not fatal anymore for the elderly in particular. So a lot of people have, like even my partner who got it and nearly died, he was in his mid 60s. That's not that elderly, and so, yeah.
Yeah, that's not exactly ancient.
But as soon as it becomes non-fatal, I think everyone will be able to be relaxed about going in. And that just takes a good antiviral or there's other types of solutions. You can also have something that would knock out the cytokine storm and makes it non-fatal. There's a couple of other areas where you can actually take the threat away.
So is now a good time to be a venture capitalist?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It's a change, very exciting change in the world and in consumers, right? This sparks a whole new wave. So we get to be a part of that.
I think, Rebecca, it's certainly a good time to be, if you're a venture capitalist who works closely with founders. I don't think there's ever been a time where founders have needed more kind of counseling, support, benchmarking, advice, feedback, capital, whatever it may be. But all the different hats that you normally wear, I think, have been accentuated by this crisis, where I think people have, the founders have really leaned on the board members and VCs more than ever before.
Yeah.
Which, to Kamran's point, I think it builds an incredibly great bond. And personally, it's what I enjoy most. So I think it's been a very, very rewarding period of time to work closely and help the founders, and help them navigate these difficult, challenging periods. In some regards, this is actually more, rewarding than, some of the times when we get on the treadmill. But for me, I think it's a great time. It's a great time because we're going through such a huge global transformation. It causes you to think very differently and also gives you an opportunity to work closely with the founders.
That's great. Mason, do you want to add? Good time to be an angel investor?
I think for angels is mostly aligned with the interest and passion. It's always a great time to support the companies, the fields, the founders, or anything that you like to actually see forward. So never been a bad time, for sure. Especially now.
Yeah, you also have a startup, don't you?
The startup, yeah, that's a completely separate story, where our biggest customers are actually the sectors that are getting hit really hard. So the travel sectors, hospitality sectors, different story, yeah.
Okay, but you're seeing both sides of it. Okay, well, are there any questions out there? All of you have been very shy out there in the audience. We had some good questions to begin with, and I kept the ball rolling, and all of our wonderful panelists did too. So thank you, Robin. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Kamran. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Mason, for being here. And of course, we also thank Christian for his wonderful. He's actually, this kind of topic of luck and serendipity is carried through our whole conversation. So it's been a great setup. So, all right, we're going to transition to our next part of our forum. And I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to introduce our next part of our program, which you'll see here. This lengthy, I hope that you can all read this, but at 5:30, which is now 5:30, we have a tech chat with a founder, and he has a very interesting story of pivoting. And that's why we have invited him. Ricky Chu, Chairman and CEO of Phase Scientific International. He is in Hong Kong and also LA. And we are getting an introduction from Edward Chan, Senior Business Development Manager of the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks. And thank you very much for being here, Edward and Ricky. Edward, I know it's really early morning your time, so a special thanks to you. Has the sun risen yet in Hong Kong?
Hi, Rebecca. Good morning from Hong Kong.
morning.
Not yet.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you being here. So look, I also wanted to show a little bit of what the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park looks like, which is a fantastic facility. Or should I call it a campus?
Yeah.
A campus, okay. Or a park, or a parks. So what is this thing? What is this part right here, Edward?
So this is actually what we call the golden egg, which is like an iconic structure on our campus. Because, you know, as a technology park, we want to incubate good tech startups.
Okay. So the golden egg. So what is that, like a theater or something?
Yeah, it's usually used as an auditorium. We do a lot of different events there. Even though now with COVID-19, like we are moving a lot of our events online, like this one.
Right. So how many buildings are in this whole campus?
There are about like 25 buildings or so on campus. So, and you can see that we also have very nice sea views.
Yeah, oh, definitely. So is everybody working now in Hong Kong? Are they all back to the campus here?
I think more or less, because as you know, the COVID-19 situation in Hong Kong has stabilized. Like, yeah, take our organization as an example, like we are all back to work already. So actually, I was actually quite surprised too when I heard from the panel that people plan to go back to the office next year.
Yeah, that's amazing to me too. And you know, I've been doing interviews across the U.S. and I'm finding that, you know, it's much worse than I thought, that people really are not going back to where it was for a long time. And so I think our venture capital panelists confirmed that. And so, yeah, but Hong Kong is pretty much back to normal or not?
I think more or less, but I think we are a bit fortunate. So we got into this a little bit earlier than the rest of the world did. And people do wear masks consistently. I think that helps, yeah.
So if people want to go to Hong Kong, assuming that they're going to be eventually not having to be quarantined for 2 weeks, and they could take part of this probably virtually in some of these goodies that the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks offers. Can you just walk us through really briefly what, I have this wonderful slide up here that you've developed. Can you just take 1 minute to just tell us what it is, to highlight?
Oh, thank you very much, Rebecca. Yeah. So this slide really encapsulates what the Hong Kong Technology Parks offer. By the way, our community has more than 850 tech companies covering all sorts of technologies, from AI, biotech, fintech to smart city technologies. So just one example, like just look at the startup section. Basically, startups that set up in HKSCP can receive a financial support from 110K to 500K USD. So it's basically free money and we don't take any equity, because at the end of the day, we want our tech companies to grow and succeed by using Hong Kong and HKSTP as a base. So yeah, I don't want to take up too much of the time, but on the right is my contact info. Feel free to reach out if you want to learn more, or scan the QR code if you want to join our Slack community, which actually is called Innovation Sans Frontier, which means innovation doesn't have boundary, like what we're doing now. Like regardless of where you are in the world, we totally can still get connected. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, the reason that we have Ricky Chu here, as you can see, he's here as one of our panelists. Well, Ricky is housed at the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks, and here's a photo of his lab at the parks. So Ricky, can you tell us what's going on here? Hi, Ricky. Ricky is chairman and CEO of Phase Scientific International, and I did a prep interview with him last week. I was really enthralled to hear about all the changes and the quick pivot that he's been making. But what's going on here in this photo, Ricky?
Yeah, so hi everyone, and thanks Rebecca and the Science Park team for the invitation, and very happy to be here. So this is the lab that we have in Hong Kong, and this lab was built in 2018. That is the second lab that we have established, for my company. We originate in Southern California, where my core technology was, developed during my PhD thesis at UCLA Bioengineering. But going back to this picture, this was one of the major decisions that I have made in 2017 to decide to move my quote-unquote global headquarters, while we're still a startup, but to set up in Hong Kong, and also to expand, our core technology applications from infectious disease diagnostic to cancer, oncology, liquid biopsy, applications. And this lab in Hong Kong is the major reason why that we are getting where we are right now, in that we have very successful development on the liquid biopsy oncology applications. But everything was seems to be going well, right? In Hong Kong, and we got this amazing technology that was validated at MD Anderson, right, the world's largest oncology center, and that was 20, 30 times better than the current gold standard. So it was amazing for us, and also so thank you so much for the Hong Kong team to get that done. But I think in February everything changed this year, right, with the COVID situation.
Right. Well, that's what I want to hear about is, and I'm sure the audience will want to hear about what you did,
right.
How this fast action has paid off for you, or is paying off for you.
Right. So I think I would like to explain a little bit more about what my company actually does, right? So my company is based on this core technology that I developed, but this is about something called sample preparation. So what sample preparation really means is any kind of diagnostic that you do, the first step is about getting the samples, right? And the whole point of the diagnostic is trying to detect the presence of the biomarker that are rather present or not in the sample, right? And one thing is very important but often overlooked is the step called sample preparation, where you're trying to, extract, or you're trying to prepare the sample for your downstream, diagnostic assays. So we have these amazing technologies that can enhance all these diagnostic tools by making it faster, easier to use, and making them more accurate, right? So initially, when I said we pivot to Hong Kong and focusing on liquid biopsy, we were focusing on extracting DNA from blood that allow, downstream, diagnostic to detect cancers, right? Even early stage cancers. But in February, when the COVID started hitting China and Hong Kong, and this is right after the Chinese New Year, and the government basically asked everybody to try to stay home. All the government, employees are staying home, and the chief executive suggests every corporate to ask everybody to stay home. And then, my guy just texted me, the night before, say, hey, should we be coming back? Well, I say absolutely. I mean, if we don't go back to work, and most of you are working in the lab, this company is done, right? So sorry, but we have to get back to lab. But then I have an all hands meeting the first morning of getting back to work, and I made a decision at that point. I said, look, we've been doing cancer and we've been doing so well, but right now it seems like all the commercial activities, all the collaboration that we have with all the major universities throughout the world has to be put on hold. That is something that we can anticipate that is going to happen. So why don't we take a pivot here? Instead of doing cancer, diagnostic, let's try to see with what we have with our core technology, which we have very high confidence, right, to be applied to many different areas. Let's try to focus on COVID applications. So the first day I mapped out 6 products that we're gonna develop based on COVID that can be empowered and enabled and unlocked based on our core technology. Everybody think I'm crazy, right? Everybody crazy. I say, okay, fine. Maybe we don't start with all 6. Let's start with the first one, right? That we are feeling the most comfortable with. So we all work on that basically, it was amazing because I think the team in Hong Kong respond extremely well to the challenge, and they feel that strong sense of responsibility that want to get this done, because that's basically what all the media is talking every single day, right? So they feel like, hey, I'm actually working something that is going to be, making a huge impact. So everybody's working crazy. We work, 15, 16 hours a day. We usually went home like, 2 or 3 o'clock, in the morning. And the amazing part is that because we also have another R&D team in LA, right? Most people say I'm crazy because, hey, you're a startup, you have only that much, money in your bank. Why do you start 2 R&D? One in China and one in Hong Kong and one in the US. Well, I think this COVID situation basically pays off everything that, I have trying to invest in the beginning, because the moment that we go home, we stop doing the lab at 12 a.m. We spend 2 hours updating our guy in LA about what we have done with the results that we got. And then we go back to sleep. And then by the time that we wake up in the morning, we got a new set of data that done by our teams in LA. So it's, we're basically able to do our research, 24/7 around the clock, in the global settings. And because the fact that, in February, no one honestly in the US and Europe care about COVID. They don't think this is gonna catch on and it's gonna get to them. And nobody is really, I would say, seriously thinking about developing anything related to COVID at that moment. So we have a real head start, right? So I think in 3 weeks, which was light speed, compared to any kind of product development, we got our first product done. And at that time, and that is also the advantage being in Hong Kong and in China, that we collaborating with the Chinese government, the Ministry of Technology and Science, that they give us special permit to enter Wuhan, which is the ground zero for, for the COVID. We enter, we bring our product, we go to the hospital, and we do a head-to-head comparison with our product with their gold standard, right? And the result was amazing. And of the 20 newly enrolled patients, they used their gold standard method, they found 5 positive cases. They use our product, they found 7, right? And extra 2, confirmed case by our technology was ultimately further confirmed to be positive using their own gold standard method. So it's a true positive converted cases. So, that really gives us a lot of confidence and a lot of attention on what our technology can build. And that was by the end of February. That is what's going on. So we try as best as we can to quickly commercial what we have and get it ready to go. And it was amazing because I think that was in the early March. The head of US CDC, the director, just made an article basically saying that, hey, US now, the COVID thing is starting to hit US. And, the CDC is sending out, lab kits to all the public health lab, hoping that they can all help, diagnose for COVID. However, we were stopped by one thing. We do not have the sample preparation kit because it was in very, short supplies globally, because everybody has been using the same gold standard and, technologies. And it's all, clumped towards this 1 or 2 companies that has been, in very, very short shortage. Like even today in California, you can buy, that gold standard product. So the fact that we have something that is available and the moment that we have made ourselves, aware that we have this great product, we got a call from FDA, US FDA, saying that, hey, what can we do to help you get this product out to be used in the US? And it was crazy because if you know FDA at all, they won't care about you until, 1 year or 2 years after your applications. But, the moment that we got our product developed and we announced that we have some amazing data, people start knocking the door and talk to us. So I think, yeah, it was a great decision looking back that, we have made that call to pivot into COVID. And but one thing that I'm very excited more than the product that we're able to develop is our team, both in the US and Hong Kong, were reacting very positively, and working very diligently, in that whole in this whole situation.
What's the size of your team?
We have 15 people in California, and we have 20 in Hong Kong. But because of our the production that is that is coming up, we just hired 15 more people in Hong Kong to boost our production. We just hired one. We just ran one more floor you know, to set up production lines. So
you do the production right there.
We do the production both in Hong Kong and US. And I think, you know, the VC, we're talking about a supply chain issue. We feel it hard because, well, first, this is the first time, you know, a company that get to the stage of, you know, production and commercialization. So not only that we spend the time to develop the product that everybody wants, but at the same time, we are the first time that need to deal with the supply chain, the production plan, and the regulatory and all the stuff that is going on. But I think in a way that we're also lucky that because the first time we're doing this, we can also, based on the current situation, to establish our supply chain line instead of reacting to that. So right now, you know, basically we have two independent manufacturing team that have two independent supply chain. You know, one supplying our US manufacturing, one supplying our Hong Kong and China production.
Let's see if the VCs have any questions for you.
Sure.
How about the venture capitalists out there? Kamran, Sean, Melissa, Robin, any questions for Ricky? If not, I want to know how all this has impacted your business, your revenue stream. And your, and your cost. I mean, how has it impacted your business? While the VCs are getting their questions warmed up, I'll keep going.
Right. I mean, before COVID, we just launched our cancer product. In fact, we launched our cancer product in January this year. So obviously, nobody cares about cancer. Well, everybody cares about cancer, but you know, in terms of our customer, you know, in terms of our collaborations, in terms of publishing papers, you know, everything needs to put aside, right? And so we have just minimal revenue before COVID, but just last week that we signed $2 million deals with Indian and Brazil governments on selling our product to them, and they already paid their down payment, you know, on the product. So, I mean, this is way beyond our financial, you know, projections, you know, when we did it in 2019, you know, and yeah, and we are quickly ramping up our productions. And if we are the best case scenario, we can make tens of millions of revenue just this year, based on the COVID product that we are making.
And be profitable too. Pardon me? Will you be profitable too?
We will definitely be if we are hitting our best case scenario. And I think it's quite likely that we would able to break even after we have burned, you know, $20 million since the founding of this company. So.
Okay, so you've raised, how much have you raised in venture capital so far?
Well, we got about $3 million from, you know, the different departments in the US government, Gates Foundation, you know, Chinese government, Hong Kong government. They are, you know, non-dilutive fundings. And we also got now about, you know, $17 million US dollars, you know, from investors.
Okay, so Gates Foundation is one of your investors.
Yes, very early stage.
Very early stage. How did you make the connection to Gates Foundation?
Well, I mean, in the very beginning, they have, you know, all these challenge, right? Gates Foundation challenge, and we applied for it, and they like our ideas, right? And and we go there. So.
Okay, and since then, how has been the capital raising since you got this really good luck from Gates?
Right, I think, you know, that definitely helped us, you know, get a lot more attentions, and people see that, oh, hey, you know, Gates invests in you guys, and you know, in biotech industry, you know, the due diligence part is always a lot more challenging. So everybody just look to who invests in you, who believe in you in the first place, and oh, you seem to be still surviving. Okay, you must be doing something right, and you know, and get the conversation going. But I think, you know, right now the fact that we are able to finally generate revenue. I think we really stood out from many of the other biotech companies that are still, you know, burning and developing products. And I think this COVID situation really showcased, you know, what our technology can do. And we basically educating everybody in the world why diagnostic is so important, right? Everybody know what is a serological test. Everybody know what is a nucleic acid test right now, and the importance of it in, you know, in the battle against COVID. So I think it's such an amazing, opportunity for us,
Good.
Despite the very unfortunate events.
Good. All right. Well, congratulations and super thinking on the pivot there. Sean, did you want to ask him anything?
Oh, I just I'm interested in the the RNA amplification technology. So is it what's the limited detection that you have with qT-PCR using your primer kits or whatever it is, or the RNA isolation technology you have?
Right. So my RNA extraction and isolation technologies were shown to be 10 to 50 times better than the current gold standard, and that significantly dropped the limit of detections for the downstream qPCR assay. So right now, with one of our collaboration with CRISPR technology in China, we just cracked 50 copies per mil in the limit of detection. And whereas if like the BGI product that we're selling, like pancakes, right, hotcakes, they were 100 to 200 copies per mil. So we are able to get a much better, sensitivity than the gold standard right now.
Yeah, that's certainly much better than what was originally out there. There's some stuff that's going on with CRISPR and whatnot that is actually getting down to around 7.5 per mil at this point, which is also another different way of amplifying RNA. It's super exciting that you're actually scaling your production and that you're being you're able to get out there and get great tests and high availability of tests is a key thing. Is this any way that this can be made in a more portable format, or does it always require laboratory technicians to do it using PCR machines?
Right, absolutely, and I think that is one of the advantages of our technology, because we ourselves is not developing diagnostic tools, right? So basically, we can incorporating with any kind of downstream diagnostic technology out there. So of the six product that we're developing, right? Half of them is tailored towards molecular diagnostic products, and the other half is actually working towards rapid diagnostic. Right. So basically, for example, we are able to developing oral fluid version of a serological test. As you know, serological test is all blood prick or serum based technologies, but the antibody also exists in our oral fluid, right? But it exists in a much lower concentration. So using our technologies, we are able to develop an oral fluid version of a serological test that does not need to drawing blood, right? That can just simply collecting oral fluid and a much less invasive, approach, and maximize the accessibility, of such product. And
that's super cool.
So right, and at the same time, we are also developing, highly sensitive antigen tests, but using the same, pregnancy test type technologies that, it would never be able to be as accurate as, a CRISPR technologies or PCR. But it can be done in 10 minutes. It costs less than $1, to make. And it can be massively produced very, very easily. This is something that CRISPR technology are not able to achieve just yet because the technology is so new, right? We apply ourselves on the age-old, pregnancy test type technology, allowing us to deploy that immediately, to the field. So speed is everything.
Yeah, the CRISPR stuff, the fastest one that we have takes an hour. So it's actually, it's faster than PCR, but it still takes an hour. So you have something that you can get the results in minutes. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yes.
That's very good.
Hey, well, Ricky, I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about your company and your business and your breakthroughs there. So congratulations. And
thank you.
Hey, we might have even prompted a deal here on screen. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to put Sean in the spot. But thank you for sharing your story. It's very inspiring. It's a real success story out of the COVID-19. And thank you, Edward, for introducing Ricky. And
well, okay. I guess one thing, if you don't mind, that I want to add is that the science park, the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, play a very important role on my development, because in the very beginning of our development, we don't have qPCR, we don't have any of this fancy machine, right? And we were become notoriously known within the campus that we just hog all the machine time, for our development. And but without the shared equipment that we're provided in the campus, we are not able to get to where we are.
Okay, well that's good. That's good.
Good to
Rah,
hear
rah, Hong Kong there, Edward. Okay, so well look, we're going to segue into our next part of this forum, and the next part gets well, you'll see in a second. All right, the next part is closing remarks and a virtual toast. You know, we've been doing these weekly, and we've gotten now to have some traditions. And one of our traditions is the weekly toast. And so joining me to do this this week is Douglas Lee, who's here from the Hong Kong Science and Technology, I'm sorry, not the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, but from Invest Hong Kong. And Douglas, you're in New York, aren't you? Douglas, are you joining me?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So let's move on to our segue here to the virtual toast. And I also want to mention to everyone that after this session ends in about 2 minutes, we're all going to be going to a different format where all of the people who are in the audience can participate with the panelists. So right now we only have the panelists on screen, but soon when we log off this and you log on to the Zoom meeting, we'll all be together, and then we can see one another and network with one another and have an informal discussion group. So please pay attention to your email, because the email went out about a few minutes ago with the Zoom meeting link. So you will log off this and you will log on to the Zoom meeting link. Everyone got that? Okay, I hope so out there in the audience. So Douglas, let's hear from you.
Rebecca, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
I can't see you though. I can't see you.
That's because you stopped me from being on video. Okay,
Really?
Let me give it a try. No. The host has stopped my video.
Really?
Yes.
That's strange. I didn't think I did that.
Okay. Yeah, the host has stopped my video for some reason.
You were on the video before, so I'm not sure why you're not on now.
Yeah.
I can't, I don't have an option here to hide non-video participants. There's
Okay.
Edward. I'm sorry. I think let's do have this as our screen for the time being while we do the toast. And Douglas, if you would, here are the little buttons at the top above your photo. That's where you adjust whether you have a screen share or not.
Okay. Well, in any case.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, anyway, I'm Douglas Lee of Invest Hong Kong in New York. And I'm joined with my colleagues here, Leo Naut and Dimitri Horiatis. And yes, and before moving on to our quarantinis, I just wanted to say that we are very happy to be part of this great program. And I want to thank Silicon Dragon and all the speakers and sponsors. So Invest Hong Kong is a department of the Hong Kong government. We help American and other foreign companies to establish and expand their operations in Hong Kong. We help companies of all sizes and industries, which include startups. Hong Kong's startup ecosystem is actually quite vibrant and robust, with over 3,200 startups in co-working spaces, accelerators, and incubators across many sectors, such as financial technology, information technology, and services. And the founders are also very international, with over 34% from outside of Hong Kong, and most of those are from the United States. Hong Kong provides access to new markets in the region, funding from seed capital to IPOs, and a strong and diversified pool of talent. We also have one of the highest density of unicorns per capita globally. Now, our Start Me Up HK Festival takes place next month on July 6 to 10, and will be virtual for the first time. Okay, hold on for a second. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So it'll be our Start Me Up HK Festival will take place next month on July 6 to 10, and it'll be virtual for the first time. It's a week-long extravaganza of startup conferences, and also it includes startup villages, a job fair, a services marketplace, and business to investor matching. The events are free, and Silicon Dragon will be hosting a community event there as well.
Yes,
Now,
that's going to be Thursday night of that week, which will be July 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which will be 8 a.m. Hong Kong time, July 10th. So on the Friday in Hong Kong and a Thursday in Pacific time. So thank you for, we're pleased to be a community event in the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival. And we have a great program for that. We have 3 VCs that are going to be talking about China internet trends. So we're looking forward to that.
So come join us. It's a virtual event. Now,
Yeah.
just a word about the coronavirus in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is gradually recovering now. Just this month, the schools reopened, and the number of people allowed to gather in public places has been increased, but there still are international travel restrictions. But throughout all of this, there have been no disruptions in the financial markets in Hong Kong. As a matter of fact, with lots of liquidity and international politics, it's been driving Chinese tech companies to do secondary listings there. So they feel that by having a secondary listing in Hong Kong, they actually have more value being closer to their home markets. And last November, we saw Alibaba list, and they raised about 11.2 billion US dollars. And then last week, the gaming company, online gaming company, NetEase, they raised 2.7 billion US dollars. And then just today, the e-commerce company, JD.com, they raised 3.9 billion US dollars. So we do expect more to come. So with that,
what about Baidu? What about Baidu? Are they gonna do a secondary?
Baidu, there are a couple of companies out there that have expressed interest in it, but nothing concrete yet.
Okay.
So I do expect more to come around. And so with that, I'd like to propose a toast to better times ahead. So cheers, and thank you very much to everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Everyone raise a glass. And then please join us on the Zoom meeting. So check your email and you'll see a Zoom link there. And then I'm just going to close us out here for a second. So thank you, Douglas, for giving the closing remarks and the virtual toast. Thank you to our friends in Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks and Invest Hong Kong. We really appreciate your support. And all of the attendees out there who got guest tickets, you can thank the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks and Invest Hong Kong. And of course, you can thank Silicon Dragon. We do appreciate your support in coming and joining us week after week with our discussions. Okay, now here's a point. As I have stressed, check your email for the login. We're a little bit late, but hopefully we'll see everyone there in a minute. If you liked our Ask a VC Anything series, please join us next Thursday. Chibo Tang from Gobi and the Alibaba Entrepreneurs Fund. And then the week after that is James Mee one of the top 100 venture capitalists in the world from Lightspeed China. He's going to be on June 24th. And please just join us here and watch this space for other news coming up. And I'd like to just thank everyone for joining us, and I'll see you online with the Hollywood Squares type format. I call it Hollywood Squares, even though maybe some people don't really know what Hollywood Squares mean if you didn't grow up with game shows on television. But it's, you know, all of our faces will be there, and it's a very friendly environment. So hopefully we'll see everybody there. Okay, thank you. Take care now. See you online. Bye. Bye-bye.